And when you get into the article, it talks, and it's ironic, it's very ironic. It talks about allegations of price fixing and bid rigging in roadworks under that secondary road company, and who is the chair falls under the Minister of Works and Transport, the Honorable Rudranath, and the chairman of that secondary road habilitation was the I guess the Gary Sobers of state companies, Mr. Herbert George, who sits as chair of several important state companies like NIDCO and National Quarries. And so it's a very ironic to hear that under the Keith Christopher Rowley administration, there's talk about bid rigging in a company that is only 2 years in existence. And I am sure my colleague will have a lot more to say on that this morning. So let me get into my presentation here this morning before I hand over to MP Indarsingh. I themed my presentation this morning, the 7 deadly sins of this government against the energy sector. Trinidad and Tobago, how much longer will we allow this government to be dishonest and mislead us? How much longer will we allow them to tell us all is well when we are facing a crisis in our energy sector? Today we rebuke and renounce the government's misleading, deceitful, and fraudulent attempt over the past week to tell you that our energy sector is unstable and performing when in fact it has reached a fragile state. This morning we reject the gaslighting of the minister by the Minister of Energy this week, who tried to fool the population into thinking a boom is on the horizon, when all that is ahead of us is a tsunami of production declines, the exodus of energy investment, and reduced national income if we continue on this path. This morning, we will be debunking the lies which continue to allow massive failure in our energy sector to grow. It is about accepting and understanding that our economy, our national stability, our standard of living and future can no longer progress with the consistent lies and deceit of this government in the energy sector. It is clear that the Prime Minister has either lost touch with reality or simply has opted for fiction over facts to hide his 9 years' failings in the energy sector. Because no metric, no existing energy review or any energy analysis could prove that he and his team revitalized or saved the energy sector. None at all. As a matter of fact, no other government has committed more sins and detrimental actions against our energy sector than this present government. While they ramble with words this morning, this morning we will present the facts of this government's 7 deadly sins against the energy sector, which have plunged the future of our nation into disrepair. This government's 7 deadly sins against the energy sector have decimated the economic stability of our citizens. And I want to read out the 7 deadly sins before I get into it. 1, this government has driven our oil production to the lowest in 60 years. 2, collapsed gas production to a 25-year low. 3, this government has driven drilling for oil and gas down by 58% from 2015 to 2023. 4, this government has destroyed ammonia and LNG production. 5, this government has destabilized the downstream sector like no other. 6, total decimation of the energy sector employment and energy GDP. And 7, this government has failed badly on renewable energy. Let them come and say that these sins are not so, and we can refute every one of them. Sin number 1, as I expand, sin number 1, this government has driven our oil production to the lowest in 60 years. From 2015 to now, this government has driven oil production down by almost 30,000 barrels of oil. And you would see a slide on my left. Kamla Prasad Bisesa-led PP government left oil production at 78,656 barrels per day. Let me repeat that because there's a narrative out there. Kamla Prasad Bisesa-led government, and at the time the Minister of Energy was no other than Kevin Ramnarine, 78,656 barrels per day. This present government led by the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley as Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy Stuart Young, our production as at November 2023, which is on the website of the Ministry of Energy, total production is approximately 49,000 barrels per day. So when we left, we demitted office, it was approximately 78,000 barrels. Today it is 49,000 barrels per day. Not what is being said in the Sunday Business Express of today by someone called a business editor or business desk writer. How could they have saved the energy sector when oil production has fallen below 50,000 barrels for the first time since we became an independent nation? As a country, ask yourself, how did we reach here? As a country, ask yourselves how this government promises us to reach over 86,000 barrels of oil by 2020. That was said by the Minister of Finance in his budget statement. They had promised that they would have driven the production up to 86,000 barrels per day. But yet, today, we are seeing as at November, the figures is under 50,000 barrels, 49,600. And if those figures, we are in April, if those figures were any greater than the 49,600, I am sure the Minister of Energy would have posted that on the website of the Ministry of Energy. The answer is simple. This government has stifled the oil companies. The Prime Minister boasts about saving decisions, but why has he persistently failed to act year after year as production collapse? Kamla Prasad Bisesa gave incentives to help the oil companies explore our deep waters. The Prime Minister has done nothing but visit boardrooms with Stuart Young, his Gary Sobers. They constantly go on trips. And I see there's a headline here, the Energy Minister seeks global gas deals, another one of his famous trips that he travels throughout the world, and he has never achieved anything as we speak today. We in the opposition will not allow the shameless narrative to be put in the public domain that the restructuring of Petrotrin saved our energy sector. The shutdown of Petrotrin and creation of Heritage has single-handedly harmed oil production. Now, Heritage, as we know it today, was Trinma, as we know it back then. Trinma was a unit out of Petrotrin, and it was a very successful unit that did the drilling and production for our oil in Petrotrin, as we know it. Back in 2017, the Minister of Finance, Minister Imbert, told an energy conference that Petrotrin was the country's best chance to reverse oil production. 1 year later, they shut down Petrotrin, sending home all the experience needed to increase our oil production. Today, Heritage can report on zero new innovative finds or technology to contribute to production. The second deadly sin of this government in the energy sector is that they have collapsed gas production to a 25-year low. And you will see the slide on my left. The PP government, led by the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, left gas production at 3.88 MMCF. And today, this government, under Stuart Young and Prime Minister Rowley, is struggling at approximately 2.5 MMCF. Minister Young likes to defy logic by saying the decline started under the PP government. But what he fails to admit is that the PP government took steps to secure our gas production. It is Angeline Juniper gas that is propping up our country today, along with Matapal and SIP. Matapal and SIP were two other drilling wells that started under the PP government and under the Minister Kevin Ramnarine. So we had Angeline, Juniper, Matapal and SIP. If it wasn't for the incentives by the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa government, this economy would not be able to stand today as we speak. What Minister Young would not admit is gas production has declined because the oil companies rejected this government's first deep and shallow water bid rounds. The companies saw no attraction to find and drill for gas with those terms. What Minister Young wouldn't admit is that even now, major gas projects such as the Calypso are in doubt because the companies are now asking for better terms. Woodside, who is in charge of Calypso, had to go to an international conference in Texas to ask for better terms. And I say stay tuned, because there will be another board meeting with Woodside to see if they can assist. They like to fool this country into thinking that this new basket of gas prices are compensating for the reduced production. The maths is not mathsing, because regardless of the price, when you have no gas to sell, you will have no earnings. Trinidad and Tobago, the hard reality is, the man who calls himself the nation's greatest salesman, Prime Minister Rowley, and his Gary Sobers, Minister Young, has bought zero new oil and gas to this country in the last 9 years. Zero. And we have seen it. Our natural gas production has fallen. Sin number 3. This government has driven drilling for oil and gas down by 58% from 2015 to 2023. In our last year of government, we completed drilling on 75 wells. This government completed a meager 31 wells last year. And there's a slide that shows it. The only way to find oil and gas is to encourage drilling. But when a government reduces the average for drilling, how can oil and gas be found? When a government makes it hard for foreign companies to access forex, how can they invest in drilling? When a government fails to offer competitive terms to companies to enter our waters to drill, why will they choose to increase activity in Trinidad and Tobago? Sin number 4. This government has destroyed ammonia and LNG production. And there's a slide. Today, ammonia and LNG are earning massive prices on the global market. Yet this government has collapsed the production of ammonia by almost 1.4 million metric tons between 2015 and 2023, thanks to the lack of innovation and gas in our economy. Ammonia production has gone from 4.9 million metric tons to 3.5 million metric tons. Millions in revenue have been lost. And I just want to show that, remind my audience that Methanex production fall by 1 million tons from September. So it is not the opposition saying this. This is the company Methanex. And if you read this article, it talks about a further mothballing of a particular company in September. All right? Sin number 4. So let me continue under sin number 4. LNG and ammonia production isn't down because of Kamala and the UNC. It is down because when BP came to this government and said we don't have gas, we had infill drilling problems, this government ignored it. So sin number 5. This government has destabilized the downstream like no other. It is ridiculous that Minister Young has the audacity to speak about NGC negotiations last week, when under this government, the downstream sector has collapsed. Has Minister Young forgotten the disaster of the Houston negotiations, which led to the most plant closures in 2020, right in my colleague's constituency of Cooper South in Point Lisas? Has Minister Young forgotten that as soon as this government took over, plants like Yara shut down, right? The steel is metal shut down. Maybe Minister Young has forgotten just last month that the situation facing Point Lisas is so dire that Methanex, as I mentioned, will be forced to shut down the Atlas mega plant when it restarts the Titan plant. Is that how Minister Young and Rowley, Prime Minister Rowley, saved the energy sector? To the point that international companies can no longer operate their plants together. Sin number 6, total decimation of the energy sector, employment and energy GDP. How could this government boast about saving the energy sector when employment in the energy sector has fallen by 52% from 2015 to now? How can this government claim to have revitalized the energy sector when energy sector contribution to GDP has fallen to almost $20 billion from 2015 to now? When the PP government left office, there were over 20,500 people in the energy sector workforce employed. Today, that has fallen to just under 10,000. Under this government, companies like ExxonMobil have relocated to Guyana, as TT energy industry is becoming very unattractive. And they say they have saved our energy sector. When the PP government left office, the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissell-led government, the energy sector contribution to GDP was $61 billion. Today, in a high price environment, it is only $42 billion. That is a reflection that this government, this present government, has ignored that the energy value chain and ignored innovative measures to help the upstream, midstream, and downstream. And I will not expand on sin number 5, but sin number 7, that this government failed badly on renewable energy, and I'll talk about that in another time. Let me respond to Minister Young. Minister Young has a knack for hiding from the reality of failure that his government created by simply issuing a statement of angry rhetoric without any factual basis. This week, in an attempt to hide that under him, oil is at its lowest, gas is at its lowest, energy GDP and employment at its lowest, and all energy metrics at their lowest, he came out with his usual blame the UNC claims. Let us debunk these falsehoods. Minister Young told us Trinidad and Tobago, and I quote, energy sector was in a rapid decline in terms of both oil and gas production by the time Kevin Ramnarine and the UNC left office in September 2015, and why both gas supply and gas sales contract expired without being renewed, as same was never discussed or negotiated between 2010 to 2015. The FOIA, and they don't want to listen, obtained by the fishermen and their friends, shows that there were no expired contracts during the term of the UNC. You cannot blame the UNC. Minister Young tells us that, and I quote, the PNM government and NGC have between 2016 to 2023 negotiated and renegotiated scores of gas supply and gas sales contract on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If that was so, how come the Express reported on the 23rd of February 2023, I quote the Express, the inability of natural gas company, NGC, to provide downstream operators and other investors with natural gas contracts exceeding 3 years is holding up hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, according to several industry sources. Young tells us again the UNC poor energy policy of accelerated capital write-offs in a manner that he does not change the fact that this policy resulted in the largest gas supplier informing this government in 2015-2016 that as a result of the Trinidad and Tobago will receive no revenue from the gas from that entity from 2015 to 2024. Again, another fallacy by Young, as these incentives not only brought investment, but the companies never fully used them. And I go back to a quote that President Norman Christie at the time, the former BP President Norman Christie, has told this country time and time again that without the incentives by the Kamala Prasad-led government, that the kind of exploration, the Juniper, the Angeline, Matapal, and the SIP would not have taken place to save our economy. That is clear, that is there, and Minister Young does not want to face reality. The reality is clear. Young has no credible answers to the UNC energy performance, so resorts to fallacies and tales. And like his boss, he's becoming the bully number 2. I want to turn a little bit to NICON, because in the papers today, there's an article by Dr. Winford James, the NICON debacle. All right? I will just touch a little bit on NICON, because NICON appears to be a hot topic that we have always said to this government. When Prime Minister Rowley gave away what we know as the WGTL plant to Ainsley Gill and his team to peppercorn prices, and when he opened that plant, we always told this government, be careful with this whole venture that this government has gone into bed with Ainsley Gill and this NICON. And the only, and what is happening now, you're seeing that basically NICON plant is a failure, and some members or even their creditors are now calling to wind up this company and put them in receivership. But the issue goes further than that, because if you read the article by Dr. Winford James, if you read the article, it has to do with an issue with Republic Bank Limited that is holding a loan, a sizable loan on this NICON venture. And I just want to read a little paragraph in Dr. Winford James' article, and I quote, "Surely they must have been worried about the note holders, which is in Republic Bank, were not being periodically paid. If it is not the bank that should be exercising oversight of what the board was doing, who then?" And basically, there is some concern of the sizable amount that Republic Bank is holding. And not only Republic Bank, I think there's another couple other banks and credit unions that are holding sizable loan portfolios, that monies that they lent to NICON, this venture called NICON. So we say stay tuned, because this whole NICON debacle is long from coming to a close. I just want to touch a little bit on the Dragon Gas deal and the Shell. There was an article this week by Reuters. Curtis Williams was the reporter or the writer of that article for Reuters. One of the most damning failures of this government energy strategy has been its approach of placing all the nation's energy prospects in this Dragon Gas deal and the Maduro Venezuelan regime. Again, we in the opposition clarify that we are not against the Dragon deal. We see the value in all gas. It is on that premise, it is simply beyond reason why this government has ignored gas within our own borders, our own waters, why place all hope on this Dragon Gas deal with Maduro. For the last year, while the government and its cheerleaders at the Energy Chamber praised the Dragon Gas deal, we have always urged caution, the opposition has always urged caution on the issues that still require answers. We have always said that Dragon Gas is an opportunity, but not a confirmed executed development. I want to repeat that. The opposition has always said the Dragon Gas deal is an opportunity for our country, but not a confirmed executed development. This week in a Reuters report, Shell, the energy company, is now seeking a long-term license with the U.S. government before it makes a final investment decision. I want the country to understand what that means. When this government received license from the U.S. and then Venezuela, they gave the population an impression that all was needed now was for Shell and the NGC to turn on the tap for gas. But in reality, there is no infrastructure. There is no significant mobilization of gas as yet. Shell is now seeking permission from its shareholders. Shell is now seeking permission from its shareholders to make a final decision to obtain funding needed to invest in the infrastructure needed to produce gas. So, you know, there's an article, Shell is seeking long-term license from the U.S. government. And it is critical because Shell has shareholders to answer to. Just like this government, we are their shareholders. But Shell seems to want to be able to tell their shareholders that they have a long-term license agreement before they invest billions of dollars into a very hot geopolitical situation with the Venezuelan government. So we have a lot more to say about that, but again, I just want to remind Minister Young and Prime Minister Rowley that we are not against this Dragon Gas deal, but you owe this country answers, and we want to ask, have you invested any money on this dragon gas deal with the Venezuelan government? And we have asked that question and we want answers. Has either NGC given funding to the Maduro government as a down payment, so to speak, on this dragon gas deal? Only this week, Minister Young was on the radio saying that the oil and gas sector was thriving because of a 2-year license from the US and a 30-year license from Venezuela. But now, all of a sudden, when asked at a conference, Minister Young told Reuters that, and I quote, obviously, a 2-year license has a window, and this is a transaction that will take more than 2 years. Let me repeat that. Minister Young quoted to Reuters that obviously a 2-year license that they were boasting about has a window, meaning it's very tight. It has an expiry date. And this transaction, meaning this whole dragon gas deal with the Maduro government, will take more than 2 years. And today we ask Minister Young, if you knew that this transaction would take more than 2 years, why did you make the country believe that this project was going to be executed in this period? Why did you make the country believe that this 2-year license was enough time? All we are asking, when are we getting first gas from this dragon gas deal? And we understand, if there are no geopolitical issues, everything remains calm with the Maduro government and the US government, at best, it will be 2028 we will get in any signs of first gas in this dragon gas deal. Today we call on Minister Young to come clean and tell us what is the status of the license, because we know you travel nearly on a weekly basis to meet with Delcy Rodriguez and her team in Venezuela. Tell us if Shell would be receiving their term to allow for a final investment decision. Further, we call on Minister Young to tell us, given the issues facing this dragon gas deal, has the government on its own or through NGC, as I mentioned earlier, paid any money to the Maduro government or PDVSA as a down payment for this dragon gas deal? Given that Minister Young and his government has spent the last year boasting about this dragon gas deal, I want them to tell this country what the US government has indicated on this latest development. Are we equal shareholders in this partnership? So again, before I end my area on energy, before I turn to a topic that I want to bring out in the media today, all I would say to the people that Minister Young boasts about a boom that is coming, and they are setting up for general election. So Minister Young is talking about stay tuned to the country. We have done great work in the energy sector because he knows, and Prime Minister Rowley, election is round the corner, and they're trying to give the impression to the country that they have saved us in the energy sector. But for the past 9 years, I want to repeat, they have done nothing in our energy sector, and all the metrics related to the energy sector has been declining and has been down. I want to, before I come to an end, I just want to turn to one topic. If my colleague MP Indarsingh will just indulge me for 5 minutes. There's something I want to show, a picture, I don't know if the slide is up, of this vessel. This vessel, is the slide up? What you're seeing in the slide, this vessel is called White Marlin. The White Marlin. All right? It's a floating vessel that does dry dock work. All right? It is owned by Boskalis, which is a Dutch company. And we are asking several questions here today, this morning. My colleague MP Tanku, the member for constituency of Oropuch West, had raised it in the media this week. There was a story carried on it. But I want to expand on that particular story. Because you see, millions of dollars have been spent on this vessel coming into our waters. millions of dollars. We have calculated, I have calculated, based on what Minister Rohan Sinanan said in a TV interview on TV6 on January 23, 2024, when this vessel came into our waters. This vessel came into our waters on January 21st, Sunday, 2024. Minister Sinanan was asked by a reporter what this vessel is doing in our waters. Minister Sinanan said to the reporter on January 23, 2024, that this vessel is in our waters for 1 month. 1 month. 31 days if we take 1 month. 30 to 31 days. At a cost of 2.5 million US dollars. 2.5 million US dollars. So this government has brought in this vessel, it's a floating dry dock vessel, to do dry dock repairs on 3 vessels. The APT James, the Bucco Reef, and the Trinidad and Tobago Spirit. 3 vessels. When the vessel came in, I want the media to remember, and you can go back to get that TV6 clip by Rohan Sinanan. He said that vessel will be here for 1 month to do dry dock repairs on the 3 vessels, fast ferry vessels. APT James, the Bucco Reef, and the Trinidad and Tobago Spirit for 1 month. I want to tell this country that this vessel is still in our waters. The repairs to these 3 vessels actually finished. The last one, I think, was the TNT Spirit to go down. Finished approximately Thursday this week, last week. I think that might have been April 4th. So this vessel has been in our waters from January 21st, hired by this government, either through the port authority, to do dry dock repairs on these 3 vessels. Minister Sinanan, who has responsibility for the port and the company, said that this vessel was only in our waters for 1 month at a cost of $2.5 million. We have worked out some maths that this vessel has been in our waters at least 74 days at a cost of approximately between 80,000 to 100,000 US dollars. That is close to 5 million US dollars just having this vessel alone doing repairs to these 3 vessels that I mentioned. It's a floating dry dock, this vessel, called the White Marlin. So this country, and I want the country, and I asked Minister Sinanan and the Port Authority, whether it's the chairman of the Port Authority, to tell us what was the actual cost of having this floating dry dock called the White Marlin in our waters from January 21st to approximately April 5th, over 70 days. And they have spent close to 5 million US dollars. This does not include, ladies and gentlemen, the cost of the actual maintenance repairs to the 3 vessels that I mentioned, the APT James, the Bucco Reef, and the Trinidad and Tobago Spirit. That does not even include the cost of repairing those vessels while they're on dry dock or wet dock on this vessel. So I want this government to come clean with this country and tell us what was the actual cost and who got that money, because we understand it was paid to an agent in Trinidad and Tobago on behalf of the owners of the vessel. So we want to know what was the cost and what was the entire cost of the dry dock and wet dock repairs of these 3 vessels. What is even scary, and it is even more, what's the word I can use, damning, is that this government, took over Caridoc from the CLICO assets. They purchased Caridoc from the CLICO assets. Caridoc is a dry dock facility. Caridoc is a dry dock facility which can dry dock larger vessels than these 3 vessels that I mentioned. And what is even damning is that when we asked the Prime Minister, I think I asked the Prime Minister in Parliament, and I quote, the government moved purchase Caridoc, right? What the Prime Minister said in Parliament, that the government has appointed a competent, qualified group of citizens to form the Board of Caribbean Dockyard and Engineering Services. This is back in the 24th of May 2023. The company known as Caridoc. They are currently assessing the needs of this company, and that is in the context of the national economy. What he also said, that this, by purchasing Caridoc, the taxpayers, they will be saving millions of dollars on behalf of the taxpayers, because they will be able to dry dock the government-owned vessels. But now you see, this government is bringing in, under Minister Sinanan, a floating dry dock called the MV White Marlin, to do the same thing that Caridoc can do. So we ask the question, why Caridoc was not used to do the dry docking of these three vessels? And I know, because I have first-hand experience at Caridoc, that we can do the dry docking larger vessels than what went up on the White Marlin. Now, I hope this government will come and tell the opposition that the floating dry dock at Caridoc has sunken or failed under their watch. And that is why they had to bring in the White Marlin. And we asked, who was the agent in Trinidad and Tobago who got all this money for bringing in this vessel? So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. This is another fiasco that we want some answers to, about this MV White Marlin and the dry docking of the APT James, the Boca Reef ferries, and also, I think, TT Spirit. This is another article here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've taken up a longer time than I expected. I hope MP Indarsingh does not indulge me a little bit. And I want to say thank you so much to the members as I bring up my next colleague, my brother, hard-working MP for Cuba South, Rudranath Indarsingh. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Political Leader of the United National Congress, Dr. David Lee, who is also our Chief Whip in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Member of Parliament for Pointe-de-Pierre, whom has dealt with the issue of the collapse of the energy sector under Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, and the 7 sins of his government as it relates to the energy sector, and for taking the time to go and expose the alleged actions of where the money gone or what it is being utilized for as it relates to the Caridoc facilities and so on. And I'm sure that with the passage of time, you will hear more from our colleagues on these issues that have been raised this morning. And I want to take the opportunity here this morning on behalf of the United National Congress to recognize the work of those individuals who would have served Trinidad and Tobago with a sense of duty and a sense of commitment and selfless service to the well-being of our country, and pay our sense of tribute for their work, and in spite of the fact that they have gone to the great beyond, to extend our deepest sense of condolences on their respective passings to members of the bereaved family. And I start off in the context of the judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, to that of former Chief Justice Michael de Labastide, who also served our region as President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and Madam Justice America Tiwari, and also retired Major General Ralph Brown, who has gone to the great beyond and who was the Chief of Defense Staff when the 1990 attempted coup was carried out on this country by the Jamaat al-Muslimin. Last night, our Muslim brothers and sisters observed the 27th night of the month of Ramadan and observed the night of Laylatul Qadr, or the night of power. And we take this opportunity to extend greetings to the Muslim community who will, based on the sighting of the moon, observe Eid al-Fitr or Ramadan Mubarak greetings on the 10th of April, based on the government having designated this day on the observance of Eid al-Fitr. And we pray that the blessings of their fast will be plentiful and redound to the benefit of all of our Muslim brothers and sisters, their respective families. And we take comfort in the resilience and the discipline and the fortitude that they would have had in observing one of the five pillars of Islam. And we know for a fact that as we celebrate with our Muslim brothers and sisters, there is great discomfort in the manner in which the Muslim community has been treated by this administration. Indeed, the Prime Minister saw it fit to remove the 47th descendant of the Holy Prophet, peace be unto him, and replace the said individual from the post of the Attorney General, and appointed one Reginald Amos, someone who was banned and chided by the courts in Miami mere days of becoming the Attorney General. And additionally, the refurbishment of a Muslim cemetery in Barrackpore does not in any way offset the pain and frustration that are being felt over the government's slow pace or non-existent pace in bringing local Muslims home and children who have been stranded in Syria. And one has to ask what has happened to the work of the repatriation committee headed by the former Speaker of the House and former Chairman of the Police Service Commission, Nizam Mohammed, whom had complained that the committee was not properly resourced and so on. And despite assurances being given from the Minister of CARICOM and Foreign Affairs, Dr. Aymeric Brown, and other government officials, that the government was working beyond the call of duty to repatriate citizens, little or no success has been realized, and we find it reprehensible that Dr. Brown has turned from commenting on the progress of bringing our Muslim brothers and sisters home to joining the Minister of National Security in a press conference to launch a vicious attack on the former Commissioner of Police. And we ask today, has the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or is the Minister of Foreign Affairs signaling that he has an intention to throw his hat into the political ring to contest the seat of St. Joseph in the upcoming general elections on behalf of the People's National Movement? But more importantly, recently the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, before he resorted to once again ducking and running and seeking comfort abroad to foreign lands and so on, he boasted that he had saved Trinidad and Tobago. And also, he boasted and virtually chastised the country into creating a narrative that there was no corruption in his government. And this morning, the headlines in the Trinidad Guardian reads, "Roadwork audit allegations of price fixing in secondary road company, Ministry of Finance investigating, Ministry of Works and Transport at odds with agency. And one has to ask, because the Prime Minister has been on a tirade all over the country, telling the country that there is no corruption in his government. He has boasted, in fact, I think when he went to Tropical Angel Hub, Spaniard in Enterprise, he challenged the country in his usual, gangsterism style, his aggressive style, out of control style, to say, show me who is corrupt in my government. Today, I am asking the Prime Minister, when he returns from teeing off and potting and so on in Ireland, and the golf courses in Ireland, to clear the air in terms of allegations of price fixing, bid rigging in roadworks, audit into the secondary roads company which is underway. And Prime Minister, we want you to clear the air on who is corrupt and why Mr. Herbert George has resigned as the chairman of the Secondary Roads Rehabilitation and Improvement Company, probably the only honest Indian involved in the political arena of Trinidad and Tobago, Minister Rohan Sinan, and he too could come forward and clear the air on allegations of bid rigging and price fixing and so on, because they have been up and down the road. This is a gentleman who claimed he has knowledge how many $100 bills could fit in a Carib case and so on. I don't know how he gathered that kind of financial experience and expertise, but he too can clear the air. And the Prime Minister told the country that he saved how I saved Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, this headline appeared on April Fool's Day, the 1st of April, which for me was the biggest all-fool joke carried out on the population of this country, I think, since independence. And this morning, as I said, the Prime Minister must tell us whether the citizens are better off under him and his government over the last 9 years. Where and how has his policies and programs from a governmental point of view saved the country? Trinidad and Tobago citizens have been experienced, they have been subjected to, they have been traumatized, there is fear, there is agony, there is pain, there is bloodletting on our nation's streets. In fact, we have reached the level of anarchy in the country. There's a reign of terror being carried out on law-abiding citizens of this country. There's a sense of hopelessness and gun crimes. We have moved from gun crimes to home invasions, carjackings, taxing of law-abiding citizens and businessmen, extortion, and what is now an arm of extortion. It has reached what we would term to be chilling and very cold events have been seen in our country of fire bombings and arson. And I want to remind Trinidad and Tobago, because you see, it is important for us to understand, and this has occupied the front pages, it's not hidden. It is not hidden in page 19 or pages 20 and 21 in our national newspapers. But one, the Daily Express, the 4th of April, Thursday, 2024, fatal firebomb. Couva man killed in arson attack at HDC home. Well, it has reached the point where 2 persons from the constituency of Couva South has died at exchange lots in Couva. And then you have from the Guardian of the 5th of April, arsonist torch car dealership. Arsonist torch car dealership, and central business hit in early morning attack, millions in losses and luxury vehicles destroyed. Owner puzzled why he was targeted. And in addition to that, on the Newsday newspaper, the headline, the front page story was car dealer firebombed, millions lost in arson attack. And the Express newspaper of the said day, things you see in movies, children duck from bandits. So in addition to the firebombing, it was where children with their father was ducking from the guns of bandits at a Chinese supermarket in California, once again in the constituency of Couva South. And businessmen are now being sent photographs of their homes, photographs of their spouses, of their children, where they go to school, of their vehicles and vehicle numbers, photographs of where their wives and families are going to do or conduct shopping and interaction with their family members from shopping malls and so on. And it is a known fact now that extortion is part of the landscape or the business landscape of Couva, Point Lisas, and by extension, I could say, the whole of Trinidad and Tobago. Three business enterprises recently came on separate days to my constituency office. Of course, I will not call their names, but they were to inform me separately that they were fearful. They have been getting telephone calls and being told that if they do not pay X number of dollars, they will not be allowed to conduct their businesses, and they are very afraid to go to the Freeport and Couva police stations because they feel by the time they leave the precincts or the compounds of these respective police stations, underworld elements will be privy to their reports and so on. And we in the United National Congress, our political leader, Kamla Prasad Bisasa, and all my colleagues have been saying that there can be no prosperity, there can be no development, no economic growth without effective national security. And this morning we want to say that the mental health and stability of all the law-abiding citizens of this country have been totally destroyed because of the ineffectiveness of the Prime Minister as the head of the National Security Council and his totally ineffective Minister of National Security in the failed Fitzgerald Hines. But it is important to know that they have been failing the citizens of this country for the last 9 years. So whether it is retired Brigadier General Edmund Dillon, Stuart Young, or Fitzgerald Hines, it has been a colossal collapse and a state of failure. And it was summed up by 76-year-old Vishnu Ramnarayan, a Trinidad-born, 76-year-old Trinidad-born resident, Canadian resident, who told the Express, and I quote, "Really and truly, if I don't have to come, I wouldn't come again. It is not easy. It is like you are in jail because even here you are afraid to walk. You are afraid to go anywhere. You have to have a group." These are the words. And just to give you a quick snapshot, approximately 1 week ago, another Canadian visitor Hilton Smith, 75, was found murdered at his brother's home in Arapero. Only yesterday, actress Visila Richards, 76, who was found at her Valsain Avenue home on the 6th of March 2024 with her home completely ransacked and so on. She was laid to rest. The body of Solomon Russell was found in a drain at Jamaica Boulevard, Federation Park, St. Clair on the 30th of March. A U.S. citizen, as I made mention, he suffered defeat on the 2nd of April 2024. A 35-year-old UK resident was robbed while vacationing with his family at Motmot Lodge, Plymouth, Tobago. They were robbed of £15,200, TT $2,200, jewelry, debit and credit cards. Only on the 5th of April, 29-year-old Palatini Chance Hernandez of Durata Garden, Sangre Grande, died on the 5th of April. And on the 4th of April, a 73-year-old woman and her male relative of Sorrel Trace, Longdonville, was severely beaten during a home invasion. So it is clear that where we have reached under Minister Hines and the Prime Minister as the head of the National Security Council, we have reached an all-time low. And they cannot absolve themselves in terms of press conferences and challenging the country to tell the country that they have been saving Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is in a state of anarchy, it is in a state of collapse, and it is so because of a lack of leadership on the part of the Prime Minister from a crime-fighting point of view, and his successive ministers of national security who have failed. And the Prime Minister, the Minister of National Security, recently went off on a tirade where he called, I do not know how we was able to get Minister Brown in a press conference with him. And they both took the opportunity to launch a vicious attack, as I said, on the former Commissioner of Police. And at no point in time did the Minister of National Security take the opportunity to really communicate with the public in an effective manner to say what the government is doing in terms of waging a war on crime that will help to give citizens a sense of reassurance that something is being done, that you can live in your homes with a state of comfort and you can go about your daily lives on a daily basis in a comfortable manner. All that was done was that the Minister of National Security used plenty words at this press conference and stuck within his constitutional remit to say that it was not his responsibility in terms of what unfolded under the Strategic Services Intelligence Agency. In addition to that and his failure on crime, it seems to me that anything under the ministerial responsibility of Minister Hines continues to be one of failure. His handling of the lifeguards and providing a sense of security and safety on our beaches has brought no sense of comfort to our citizens. And in the latest, I want to focus on the state of affairs in the fire services of Trinidad and Tobago, because again, I have to put the reality to the citizens of this country. And the headline on the Newsday of Thursday, the 4th of April, was John Public will die. Insufficient PPEs for officers, threats to end rescue efforts. 6 firemen collapsed after searching burning house. This is the state of affairs under Minister Fitzgerald Hine. So the police service has collapsed. The lifeguards, or the provision of lifeguards, has collapsed under him. And today, I could tell you that the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Services is in a state of shambles. It is in a state of shambles, and there are a series of examples, for example, where fires have occurred. I think that 23 of our citizens died under tragic circumstances in fires last year. And just to refresh some of your thoughts, there was an arson attack in October last year against the home of a maxi taxi driver in Diamond Village, Claxton Bay. In October of 2023, a vehicle was targeted by arsonists in Egypt Village at Point 14. In June of 2022, 3 ambulances were destroyed in an arson attack while they were parked outside a private medical facility in Sinclair, Port of Spain. And there are numerous examples, and as I said, the recent example being the firebombing of the homes of the family in Exchange Lot in Couva, HDC, where 2 of my constituents died, and I take the opportunity again to extend our deepest condolences to members of the family for this harrowing tragedy that they have been subjected to. And again, you will hear the Prime Minister tell you that he has saved Trinidad and Tobago and saved the citizens. And I have to ask the question this morning, save them from what? Fire bombings are now the order of the day, and arsonists are now being allowed to run freely, run rampage, and they are roaming Trinidad and Tobago. And Fire Officer, Sub-Officer Anderson Dick Jr. lamented that because of the lack of protective personal equipment, fire officers will now have to let John Public die because they do not have the equipment needed to save persons or properties from fires. In Hollywood, the name of the blockbuster movie or film is John Wick Must Die. But in Trinidad and Tobago, under Rowley and Hines, the reality is that John Public must die. And the declaration that John Public must die, based on the declaration of Acting Fire Sub-Officer Patrick Anderson Dick, that it underscores the immense risk that fire officers are taking to save the lives of innocent people, more so in the absence of PPE, much needed PPE that is needed from the government. And the account that was given, having to save a fire officer who went into a fire in Pinal without PPE in an attempt to save a trapped mother and her child, show the heroic effort of our fire officers, but reveal the harrowing situation in which they have been placed by the PNM government. And we in the United National Congress note that 6 of the fire officers had to be treated for acute smoke inhalation and sent on medical leave. And we have been hearing about situations as it relates to the deaths of Kemba Morris and her 8-year-old daughter, Zaya, in April of 2023. In April of 2023, again, the home of Sugrim Sundar in Penal was destroyed because fire officers lacked sufficient water to out the flames and so on. And we could go on, and with insufficient equipment, how can citizens be defended by rampaging arsonists in this country? And to hear the hogwash too, coming from the Minister of Housing recently, after 9 years, that the government is now addressing or coming up with a plan to deal with crime in HDC communities at Harp Place and Orapun and in Exchange. Camille Robinson rages, if there was a crime fighting plan and a strategy for all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, criminals and arsonists will not be running rampage in HDC communities. So we want to say we will have no association, or we reject your sense of trying to create a soft landing to the families of those who would have been distressed in the HDC communities. And why could the government not? Because the Prime Minister boasted on a national platform, he instructed the Minister of Finance, find $100 million and inject it into all of the hotspot communities. Could he not have instructed the Minister of Finance to take $20 million or so from this $100 million and buy equipment to deal with PPE equipment for fire officers who are trying to deal with fires and arsonists now? Arson is part of the, as I said, the taxing trade. It is part of the runaway crime, and it really shows whether the government has its priorities right. It is skewed, it is mixed up. They do not understand the reality and what is needed in terms of meeting and treating with the ordinary needs of the country. There's rampant wastage. $49,000 to spend on security services for the current CEO of TSTT. If you multiply that by 12, 50 by 12 is in the vicinity of over $500,500,000. That could be utilized to acquire much needed PPE. Why is the government spending and not really adding value to the lives of the ordinary citizens of this country? It is very clear and upsetting that this government keeps mamagaing people, and neither Rowley or Hines gives a care to improving national security, whether it is through fighting crime or fighting fires. It is clear that while although the city could burn down, Hines and Rowley jamming still, and they are literally turning Trinidad and Tobago into hell by allowing us to die in flames. It is clear that Fitzgerald Hines is worse than Ezekiel, who terrorizes this nation with his errors and incompetence. We can forgive Ezekiel for throwing down the pot of stew, or mistaking his grandfather's ashes for powder, for shredding his father's gratuity check, for spoiling his mother's good dress and his brother's good sneakers, and for releasing his parents' lovebirds. But we cannot forgive Fitzgerald Hines for bloodshed, death, criminality, and terror that he and Prime Minister Rowley, as head of the National Security Council, has unleashed on the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And I have to just take the opportunity very quickly again to reiterate. The Minister of National Security has lost control of the fire services of this country. And probably the Chief Fire Officer, too, it is in chaos, it is in shambles, it is a rogue entity. And this morning, we want to ask the Minister of National Security, because I am in possession of an official document here that was signed by the Fire Officer, Acting Chief Fire Officer Andy Hutchinson, carbon copied to the Minister of National Security and sent to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security, Natasha Barrow. And it is under the reference TTFS 6/3/26, catastrophic failure of boom number 2 of number 562 Bronto Skylift registration number TCN 1648. And it says, this was, as I said, sent to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security and carbon copied to Minister Fitzgerald Hines. And arising out of this inspection, it was evidence, and I'm quoting directly from this letter, that the failure of the boom was due to human error due to the involvement of a third party subcontracted by Mobile Services Limited, namely Eastern Machinery Shop, located in the Arima Industrial Estate. The work done by the named machine shop employees resulted in critical damage to the threads on the nut and shaft of the piston, resulted in the failure experienced on the 18th of January 2024. And in conclusion, a report is expected from the specialist of Bronto Skylift, who came in from Finland on the 23rd of February 2024. And it is said, thus, of note is that during the virtual meeting, the expert admitted that the certification of Mobile Services Limited to conduct the repairs and maintenance work on the Bronto Skylift, I want to repeat, has not been updated for an extended period of time, as well as the certificate for the technician so employed by the aforesaid company. So, the Minister of National Security and the Chief Fire Officer must tell us if indeed the health and safety of fire officers are being compromised because of incompetence and proper leadership in terms of what is transpiring at the fire services of Trinidad and Tobago. And I have also in my hand a note which says that in 2023, that $800,000 was spent by the fire services on this said Bronto Skylift before it failed. Minister Hines and Acting Chief Fire Officer Gary Hutchinson, can you tell us if we are attempting to mislead the population of Trinidad and Tobago? And then they want you to forget this issue about the purchase of the 20 wooden ladders for approximately $1 million. And again, I want to reiterate that the Chief Minister Hines, can you tell us if the Chief Fire Officer has instructed his executive officers, that is the divisional heads, to have these wooden ladders placed on fire tenders, and the training department would provide training for fire officers to use the ladders, fully aware that these ladders have not been approved by the Occupational Safety and Health Agency of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to quote from a document dated the 24th of January 2024, Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service Standard Report. I will not call name, but it is sent by a divisional fire officer to the Chief Fire Officer on August 22nd, 2021. I was the Assistant Divisional Fire Officer at the Fire Service School, who was at the Divisional Fire Officer at the time, contacted me and informed me there was a fleet of ladders that was obtained by the Trinidad and Tobago fire officers and was housed at the Trinidad, at the Piaco fire station. He further instructed me to carry a crew of instructors to inspect the ladders and to do an inspection and acceptance test. And we carried out the inspection and acceptance test. Upon completion of that exercise, it was observed that the ladders were of American style, where the extending line was mounted to the front of the ladder as opposed to the underside. And the officer was informed of these observations, and after he had dialogue with the chief fire officer, he then informed me that the ladders will have to be returned to the manufacturer. And today, we are being told that these ladders have not been returned. In fact, we are asking the Minister of National Security, given the inspections, given the health and safety red flags, given the fact that all equipment that have been used historically in the fire services of this country is based on British specification, why is the government hell-bent on ensuring that the $1 million that was spent is not retrieved, and why is the government failing to retrieve this money and use it in the acquisition of PPE? And again, in terms of who is guarding the guards, $162,825 was supposed to be spent on the preparation of motor vehicles or motorcycles of the Chinese brand, the Suzuki brand. Sorry, it was supposed to be used on the refurbishment of motorcycles for the Suzuki Bandit brand for Independence Day Parade. Not 1 cent of this $163,000 was utilized on any of the Suzuki Bandit brand. And the motorcycles that was used was the CF Moto brand at the Independence Day Parade. And it again lends the question, who is guarding the guards? How is the monies being utilized at the fire services of Trinidad and Tobago? And it sends a very clear signal that the fire services is rogue, it is out of control, it has collapsed, it is in shambles under Minister Hines, and it is failure after failure, fiasco after fiasco under Minister Hines as the most incompetent Minister of National Security in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So, my dear members of the media and those who are looking on, we have put the issues clearly to you here, squarely to you here this morning in terms of the collapse of the energy sector, in terms of the collapse of the national security agencies of this country, and the collapse of Trinidad and Tobago, and the very fact that the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Crowley continues to fail the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We remain at your disposal for questions that may come our way, and I will ask my colleague MP David Lee to join us at this point in time. And we remain ready to field your question.
Thank you, MP Indarsingh.
Yes, I have a couple questions here for MP Lee and then for MP Indarsingh. First question to MP Lee. Is the opposition concerned that at a time of scarce foreign exchange, the government has spent millions in US dollars to pay for the white modern?
Yeah, let me just say that we are concerned because, as I mentioned this morning, we feel that the figure is close to $5 million US just to have this vessel in our waters. Doesn't take into account the repairs of the 3 vessels, and that is close to between 38 million TT dollars that is spent. So we are asking who in Trinidad and Tobago, who are the agents for this vessel called a White Marlin, and who is receiving these U.S. funds on behalf of the owners of this vessel. So we have a grave concern, and I think Rohan Sinanan has a lot more to answer on this fiasco, as we put it, and we'll be filing questions in the Parliament to bring out more on this fiasco.
And another question to MPB. Given that there are reports that 20,000 gallons of oil are still to be drained from the mystery vessel of Tobago, is the opposition concerned that we still have no proper details on the owner of the vessel?
Thank you for that question. I alluded me to mention it in my presentation. One would remember that since the 7th of February, this barge mysteriously ended up in our shores in Tobago. To date, the paper says they still have to be draining over 20,000 barrels of fluids. And we asked Minister Young, as at today, which is the 7th of April, has he found the owners of the barge and the owners of the tug that was towing this barge in the surrounding waters off of Tobago? And today it is still a mystery that we are surprised as an opposition, as a country, that Minister Young and his team have not been able to find the owners of this barge that has caused so much eco damage to our shorelines in Tobago and our tourist sector. So we will be filing questions on that.
And for MP Indarsingh, you mentioned the government's neglecting or lack of supply of PPE to the fire services and the incidents of arson in your constituency. I think you've mentioned elsewhere, I mean, another crucial ingredient is information to the police, but I believe you've mentioned elsewhere that constituents have not been providing this information to the police because of concerns they have. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, there's a sense of fear, fear of criminals, and also fearful that when they go to the police station, by the time that they exit the precincts of police stations, and that is a known fact in Trinidad and Tobago, that criminal elements will be made aware of who came, what they reported, who was reported in terms of criminal activities and so on. And it is the reality, and as I said, 3 small businessmen from Cuba came to my office separately, and they have lodged their complaints, and I said, why don't you go to the police station? They said they are very, very fearful for their lives and the members of their families.
No more questions.
Okay. Before we end, I know I was getting a little buff from Kevon. I just want to remind our audience here this morning that tomorrow night, Monday, at 7 p.m., we'll be continuing our cottage meeting. Tomorrow night is in the constituency of Caroni East, Dr. Richard Sicharan's constituency, at Ragunanan Road Government School, which is in Enterprise, Chaguanas. We have, as normal, the feature addressed by our political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bissessa. We have Senator Jolene John who will be speaking. We have MP Arnold Ram, our feature host, Dr. Richard Sicharan from Caroni East, and also MP for St. Augustine, Khadija Amin, along with Chairman Ryan Rampasad and Councillor Brenda John at our Monday, 8 April cottage meeting at Ragunanan Road Government School. And before I end, on behalf of my colleague and all our opposition members, our MPs, senators, on behalf of the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bissessa, our political leader and opposition leader, we would like to bring greetings on behalf of, and you know on Wednesday, we will be celebrating Eid al-Fitr, Eid. It will be the ending of the fast for our Muslim brothers and sisters. So we wish them, and we wish them well as they celebrate with our country and our people Eid al-Fitr on Wednesday this week. So again, we wish them well and we bless them. So again, thank you all. Thank you the media and all listening out there. And stay tuned. Tomorrow night, as I said, our cottage meeting resumes. And will be broadcast live on our social media and one of the major televisions. So again, thank you so much and good night. Good evening.
Thank you.